The Save Women's Sports Act is a fairness issue for women. This bill ensures that every little girl who works hard to make it on a podium is not robbed of her chance by a biological male competing against her in a biological female sport. We want every little girl to achieve her athletic dream here in the state of Ohio. I urge a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
We called the Ohio High School Athletic Association. We said, well, how many transgender students have been in the state of Ohio, say, over the last 6 years? They said 11. 11 students out of hundreds of thousands of students over the last 6 years. So then we asked, well, how many students, families have complained about discrimination because of a transgender student competing with those 11 students? You know how many cases were brought up? 0. This is an issue searching for a problem that doesn't exist.
This is looking pretty straightforward and clear. Ohio has passed this bill to ban transgender students. Again, this is like high school, junior, middle school aged students from participating in sports because they're ruining it for these gold medal athletes because there's so many, as you saw, there aren't. Anyway, so this process of determining who is actually a boy or a girl when they're competing is actually the devastating part about this that I'm not sure they really want exposed here. So let's look at the details. Republicans in the Ohio State House advanced a bill this week that, if implemented, would allow for a verification process to prevent transgender women and girls from participating in female athletics. The bill states that if an athlete's, quote, sex is disputed, they're required to show a doctor's statement indicating the participant's sex based on their internal and external reproductive anatomy. Normal, endogenously, produced levels of testosterone and an analysis of the participant's genetic makeup. So, when we're talking about these examinations, evaluations, determinations of whether or not someone's a boy or a girl, let's go to some of the details of how this potentially would work. Because there was a Twitter user, Pole Vault Power, who talked about how this could go down. Let's jump down to these first, you guys. Graphic number 6. This law allows anyone to dispute the sex of an athlete on a school team. There are no safeguards in place to ensure that this is not used maliciously. Girls who do not look feminine enough, girls of color, girls who are, quote, too good, are likely to be the biggest targets. We've seen that already just in the Summer Olympics. If you guys don't remember that, there was that, I think it was a Namibian athlete, the sprinter, who was challenged by an old Olympic athlete that said, there's no way she can run that fast. We should check her out. Continue on from Pole Vault Power. First, the physician has to examine the girl's external and internal reproductive anatomy. I have to emphasize that this will impact girls as young as 5th or 6th grade, 10 to 11 years old, a year or two older than my daughter, this particular tweet is saying. Step 1 to proving your correct sex is female. A doctor will need to spread open your labia and examine the size of your clitoris. A clitoris that is, quote, too large could be a sign that you are intersex and not female enough for sports. Step 2 to proving your correct sex is female. A doctor will then insert 1 or 2 gloved fingers inside your vagina while pressing against your abdomen with the other hand so they can feel your uterus and ovaries. I remember we were talking about these women on the US gymnastics team that were assaulted, raped for decades or a decade and a half by now the deceased suicide doctor from Michigan State who also worked with the Olympic team. And we heard some of the details of what they went through. It was similar to these types of examinations, except that was for his own whatever benefit he wanted to get from it. This is for the benefit of elected officials in Ohio that for some reason have the same proclivities that guy did. What are your thoughts on this, Jessica?
Yeah, absolutely crazy story. I mean, I played college lacrosse, and lacrosse is probably the sport with the most differences in the men's and women's game. Completely different rules, different equipment, different lines on the field, everything. And like the one thing I learned from playing sports throughout my life is that some people are natural athletes, some people aren't. And oftentimes playing a sport, it's about learning a skill and training pretty hard. And I promise you, Jayar, there are definitely biological males that if they picked up a lacrosse stick, I could murk them. I promise you. It's not about biological sex. It shouldn't be. And this isn't really about fairness in the sport. It's about fear of the transgender community and misunderstanding the transgender community. And I would feel more comfortable personally in a locker room of other people who identify as women than of people of the same biological sex, because those two things, are not the same. And we're entering a dangerous territory where we're talking about examining people's biology to determine if they could play a certain sport. I mean, this is about an infringement on individual freedoms. When someone tells you they express their gender in this way, they should be allowed to do that. It shouldn't be up to the PTA or the school board to determine your individual identity. And that's really what's going on here. It's very invasive. They're operating from a place of fear. These people are living lives that are different from them. They don't understand it, therefore they reject it and are denying these people their freedom to be who they are.
Despite even the lack of cases or reasons behind this push, every time someone talks about how they want to determine whether or not a 10 to 11 to even up to 17-year-old child should be participating in sports, the pushback should be, so we're gonna read the details of what this particular politician would like to do to children. Point it out. Many conservatives talk about this without any merit and say, look at these groomers, because they told your kid, hey, how about you read this book? That's what they're complaining about. But we just heard the details, which are also very uncomfortable to even read, let alone support. Just let them know what they're supporting. Let everyone else know what they already know that they're supporting. And again, as soon as this midterms season is over, I would love to come back and mention how many politicians, Republican politicians, are talking about this. This is absolutely a midterm agenda move. Go ahead.
We just had this whole conversation about grooming in schools, talking about the Don't Say Gay bill. They don't want teachings about sex education or mentioning of the LGBTQ community, things that they were saying were woke sexual ideologies. This is just lessons in schools, talking about your identity. And sex education is necessary in schools for public health. It's really a matter of public health. And they were saying that that was grooming. And now we have these people passing a policy that will require examination of people's genitals, okay? When we talk about grooming and we talk about what's appropriate for children and what to put children through, I mean, the Don't Say Gay bill pales in comparison to what's going on here.
100%, as long as they convince enough people that they don't know what really is going on here, they'll be able to continue to let this go by. That's why you have to expose it and say what it is that they're actually looking to do to get to this non-existent problem. As that state senator then said, it's a solution looking for the problem.